Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. Well, you know, they say that an hour a day in politics, a lot can happen. And my God, what has happened in the last couple of days? The truck convoy came to Ottawa, and whether that had any impact or not, I don't know. But yesterday, obviously, the Conservative Party got rid of its current leader and elected a new interim leader. And I guess we're now into a leadership race, and lots of people are thinking about what's going to happen next. And, the Globe and Mail did an editorial today, and the last line was interesting because it said it's really a choice between the Conservatives wanting to be a regressive Conservative Party versus a progressive Conservative Party. Some people think that the party is split between right-wing people and more moderate people. And then, interesting enough, I thought the Inside Politics panel last night on CBC was really quite interesting, because after one person said the party was split, the other person said, no, they're not split. It's all right-wing social conservatives that are left in the Conservative Party, and any red Tories or progressives have left. So I think that, you know what, it's going to be an interesting couple of months in the Conservative Party. So I thought I'd invite a couple of conservatives that I like. I know you all find that strange that there's conservatives that I like, but a couple of conservatives that I've actually been very friendly with and liked. The Honorable Tony Clement, who was a member of provincial parliament, a minister in the provincial government, a member of federal parliament, a cabinet minister, and a leadership candidate. Actually invited him when he was running for leader of the Conservative Party to my dining room and my living room to make a speech and raise money for him. And even before that, I worked for him when he ran for regional council. And where was it? High Park, Swansea, that you were running for regional council?
Yeah, Parkdale High Park in 1994.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
And you were very involved in student politics at U of T at one point in time. And so you go back a long way, and I go back a long way with you. And I think that during your leadership campaign, you had one of the best lines that I remember. It was you quoted what's on every driver's side rearview mirror. Objects in your rearview mirror may be closer than they really appear. And you were talking obviously to your position versus Stephen Harper's at the time.
Stephen Harper, yeah, that's right. I'm the guy that ran against Stephen Harper. What can I tell you?
Unbelievable. And then Daryl Wook, who I had the pleasure of working with in Fair Share Appeal and the Mississauga Summit, is a long-term Tory activist. Actually ran for municipal council in Newmarket. He's been very involved in conservative politics, a big supporter of both the Ford brothers at different times, and very involved in a whole bunch of different conservative things. And Daryl became a very good friend in a lot of the work that we did. And Sarah McIntyre, who has got an illustrious career as communications person for Stephen Harper when he was Prime Minister, and Christy Clark when she was Premier of British Columbia, and someone who is now trying to take over rural Ontario from whatever that town is that you live in, that's got the Great Rapids and the Falls north of Toronto. So everyone, Sarah, Daryl, Tony, welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. And let me ask you, what's going on with the Conservative Party? Are you like blowing up?
Yeah, well, first of all, it's a pleasure to be here with such a great panel and among friends. And I think the first thing I have to say is you referenced the CBC, and we don't want to get too much into the protest, but what an embarrassing weekend for the Canadian media. They were the subject of international mockery. I guess Vladimir Putin was behind this, as the CBC claimed. But this whole notion that the Conservative Party is divided, I mean, there was a Reform Party and a PC Party close to 20 years ago. Since then, we've had a united Conservative Party. I think this is a fantasy that we're heavily divided. I think, to be honest with you, I'm actually quite excited about what the future looks like. I'm excited to turn the page. I thought Aaron O'Toole, as a human being, was a very good person, strong resume. Unfortunately, he had trouble taking positions and
sticking to them.
Yeah, sticking to them. I think he also got sort of smeared with the usual talking points from the Liberals that the media has ran with. And to be honest, up until Thursday, I would have been prepared to support him again. But the way he handled the trucker protest was disappointing to me. And, I think others stepped up, and I'm excited about what could potentially be a good race, a chance to renew some ideas. And it's clear to me that the controversy is not within the Conservative Party, it's with the Liberal leader. And it's time for a change in this country.
Sarah, what do you think?
Yeah, I know. I was just going to, Daryl, you mentioned the CBC. I said, I was thinking to myself, anyone that begins a discussion about the Conservative leadership and quotes the Globe and Mail editorial board and then goes on to quote the CBC, even though we know you're a Liberal, Brian, I thought that was, if that's where you're getting your talking points, I definitely think you don't know what's going on inside the big blue tent. And it's a big blue tent. There's always been cleavages. There's always been difficulties managing all aspects of that party, from the grassroots to caucus. And I think, what we saw was, a leadership contender who, had to go to the third ballot in order to get the win, and then veered differently during the election campaign and really disappointed a lot of caucus members with his performance in the House, with his performance in response to the pandemic. And it was a pretty big rout in terms of the vote. The fact that he went in the day before saying, "I'm not going anywhere," shows that really his leadership team and him didn't really know what was going on inside of caucus. And so, we thank him for his service. It's a tough job. It's a thankless job. And, who's ever going to be stepping into those shoes has a pretty big hill to climb in terms of uniting the party, strengthening the party, broadening the party, and making them more electable for the general electorate.
Tony, what do you think?
Yeah, so a couple things. First of all, I think the vote, the caucus vote, was lopsided because I think, having been a caucus member, I know how the fluidity of caucus meetings, and I think people saw the writing on the wall and they thought, I think caucus figured out in their own heads that if it was a 51-49 vote, the party would be seen as, split without any attempt at redemption. And so I think a lot of people switched their votes at the last minute against the leader when they saw the writing on the wall. So that's why I think it was lopsided. But the leader had like 2.5 hours before the vote at the caucus meeting to convince him otherwise and was unable to do so. So I think, I think the result was what was going to happen. I think it's unfortunate, quite frankly. We've got to, let me say this. There's a difference between the conservative movement and the Conservative Party. The conservative movement, we're there, we're arguing, we have different points of view, people are off in this direction, people are off in that direction, and we have really good debates at conferences where the movement is getting together. The Conservative Party has one job, and that's to win an election. And in order to win an election, the Conservative Party of Canada has to be unified, it has to be well funded, it has to be well organized, and quite frankly, you have to put a little bit of water in your wine as a conservative, because you're not going to agree on everything. And I think the caucus right now has lost the plot, and maybe it's COVID craziness that's going around. I don't know. But you're not going to agree with everything the leader says, and you're not going to agree with every position the party takes. That's the way big tent political parties work. That's the way the Liberal Party works. That's the way the Conservative Party works. So I wonder what is going through their heads. But the job is done. Regicide is pretty messy, and that's what they did. They killed the king. And now we have to move ahead and move forward. And I agree with my panelists that really the differences really are a little bit overwrought. They're not as big as the outside pundits think they are. And we've just got to get over it and get on with a new leader.
This is going to be a fascinating conversation. Thank you all for joining me. We're going to take a break for some messages and come back more with Sarah McIntyre, Darrell Wolk, and the Honorable Tony Clement in just a minute. Stay with us, everybody. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. It's a real honor of mine tonight to have three conservative friends of mine to join us to chat a little bit about what happened with the Conservative Party this week, and the departure of their leader, the appointment of a new interim leader, and then the launch of a leadership contest. And so we've got Sarah McIntyre, who is a former director of communications for the Stephen Harper Prime Ministerial Office, and also with Christy Clark in British Columbia. Darrell Wolk, who is a long-term Tory activist and a municipal politician at times, and the Honorable Tony Clement, a former provincial politician, federal politician, cabinet minister, and leadership candidate. Tony, you're going to run again?
Absolutely not.
Okay, well, that was for most politicians that are weaselly, that was a pretty clear comment. Tony,
Very
maybe I
clear.
can ask you a question about your caucus comments. I've had a couple of people tell me that this was really a great example of the lack of good leadership of caucus, that the institution of climate change, carbon taxes, and some of the issues in regards to assault weapons that were instituted by the leader, Aaron O'Toole, without really consulting and bringing caucus along, was the fault. And that caucus felt like they weren't consulted, they weren't included. I actually heard one person say this is an example of how some lawyers act, that they can just make an opinion, not like a manager or someone that's a true leader that knows that to be a leader, you got to have followers, and there weren't enough followers. So did Aaron O'Toole just really make a mistake in not managing his caucus well enough?
Yeah, I think that's true. I think that you just have to ask Brian Mulroney or ask Stephen Harper how important it is to manage caucus properly, and it's almost a full-time gig in and of itself. So when they go offside, like some people are blaming the Mike Chong rules that how dare the caucus overturn a decision of the extra parliamentary party in voting Aaron O'Toole leader. But the fact is, if 20 or 25 or 30-year caucus member walked out the door and formed their own caucus, just ask Stockwell Day. He went through this in the 90s. You're toast. So caucus management has got to be, if not job one, then really high up there. And I don't know all of the gory details of why it didn't work, but it's obvious in the result it did not work. So that's very unfortunate. And the fact of the matter is, there's lots of mechanisms that are available to the leader to bring the caucus along, whether it's personal tete-a-tetes or making a phone call. If your spouse is in the hospital, you phone the MP and say, hey, how is he or she doing? These kinds of things. Brian Mulroney was the master of that. And I remember being obviously with Stephen Harper and his caucus, and I get this call on January 27th, 2007. Please hold for the Prime Minister. So I'm on the phone. Okay, what have I done wrong now? Tony, is that you? Yes, Prime Minister. Happy birthday. Stephen Harper phoned me on my birthday. It was almost surreal. So that's how you engender loyalty. And woe begone any politician leader who doesn't understand that about the caucus.
I ended up having a chat with Brian Mulroney at a wedding that I was at that he was attending. And it was interesting. We were off in a corner and people weren't bothering him. So I decided I'd go over and chat with him and bother him. And it was interesting. And one of the things he said is he had a call list of 10 people minimum a day. And he had a whole bunch of other people as well if he went through the first 10. But he says, I called 10 people during holes in my schedule every day just to reach out and touch them. And I thought that was interesting. He had this call list that he just constantly made sure that he touch base. And it wasn't just caucus members, but it was
riding presidents, you name it. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Sarah, you and I have had this conversation about the 905 before, and it's my opinion that the 905, maybe it's the 905 and the 519 and 705 or something like that. But the suburban areas around Toronto, maybe Vancouver as well, maybe Montreal as well, are where elections in Canada are won or lost. And the last two leaders of the Conservative Party have not been able to break into the suburban Ontario. And, this radio station is in Mississauga. I live in Mississauga. You didn't win one seat in Mississauga and not one seat in Brampton. I think one seat in Caledon in both of the last two elections. And the reason why that lots of people will say is because your leaders appealed too much to right-wing rural Alberta Western attitudes and what weren't appealing to suburban voters. Aaron O'Toole tried to, but it didn't work. How can you, if you go more right-wing, ever win suburban Ontario and win government?
Well, I think it's how you define right-wing. I think those people want to hear strong fiscal positions and how we're going to get ourselves out of this kind of mess that the past 3 years of this pandemic have created. Everyone's seeing it at the gas pumps, at their grocery stores, at meat cost of meat, everything. If you actually position with a strong fiscal plan, that's what people care about, the bread and butter issues. And that's what Stephen Harper was king at, right? There's lots of those tax credits he got mocked for, but those were the tax credits that most families needed and were looking for a break, in their monthly expenses, whether that's the child and fitness tax credit or the home renovation tax credit. Those things worked. I think what happened for Erin O'Toole and Andrew Scheer is like a lot of those conservative families, it's not that they necessarily voted liberal, so they didn't actually go out and vote. And we're losing that growth, that potential in the party. And I think that's one reason why, although it was nasty and not a great week for the conservative leadership of the party, I do think that this is going to start a conversation of how do we get those people and who are the people that can and speak to them authentically. I think if you overscript or if you try to come across that you are, 3 weeks ago, you're against climate change and for assault rifles, and then 2 weeks later go into a community and say, we have the same values as you, and believe that climate change is happening, that ring of authenticity is hollow, and people can see right through that. And so you don't necessarily have to speak the same language in terms of being a cosmopolitan or urbanite, but what are those issues that cross-cut across voters that speak to your platform, and how do you grow your base from that? And I think we've got a lot of young and new MPs that are in this caucus that can feed into that process and identify what those issues are. And so I'm looking forward to actually seeing a renewal of ideas for the party. And I don't think that we're going to get completely veered off to the right and be a rump party. All of that kind of editorializing is bunk, in my opinion. I think that right now we're going to have a conversation with a lot of newly elected and young MPs that know what it takes to actually win, that know what urban voters want, that know what the 905 wants. And they're going to be pushing those on the table before and have that discussion during a leadership debate.
So, being from the riding of Newmarket Aurora, right in the heart of the 905, I actually feel the opposite about where our platform was. I thought in the last election there was 4 NDP parties running and 5 if you lived in Quebec. I can tell you, I volunteered in my local campaign. My heart wasn't really in it. I didn't like much about the platform. The only reason that I probably voted Conservative last time was because I didn't want to split the vote and ultimately have Trudeau again. But I'll be honest, I talked to all the other volunteers who were in the riding. There was a lot of people that stayed home because they didn't feel that we were running on a conservative enough platform. And let's be honest, Maxime Bernier was drawing big crowds. He was getting a lot of excitement. There was a lot of people that were telling me secretly that they were voting for Conservative, but they wish we were more like Maxime Bernier and the People's Party. And I don't think the solution is to move to the left and try and recreate the Liberal Party. I think we have to somehow unite the right again. I think there's a lot of stuff that Maxime Bernier has been saying over the last 2 years that's turned out to be true and has excited a lot of crowds, including the ones we saw this weekend. And ultimately, at the end of the day, there's more of a danger to us losing 10 people to the right for every one that we can potentially gain from the NDP and Liberals. So
you think that the party really should move to the right?
I think we have to know what we stand for, be proud of what we're standing for, push back against certain narratives. And at the end of the day, I think that's where the problem was with Aaron. He tried to out carbon tax the Liberals. Virtually nobody that I talked to among the volunteers or the base were excited about that. We got into some of the woke cancel culture stuff that I don't think was going to appeal to anybody other than the Liberals. And at the end of the day, it was just flip-flop after flip-flop. He pulled a Patrick Brown, ran to the right as a true blue, moved to the left. I think you've already got, 4 parties, particularly the NDP and the Liberals, that I don't see much difference between. But if you want to have an honest assessment and you look at all 4 platforms in detail, where was the difference?
So you think that in the last federal election, there were 4 NDP parties running. So you think that the Aaron O'Toole platform was so left-wing that you were describing it as an NDP platform?
Yeah, that's correct. I think that the Liberals have moved way to the left, possibly even to the left of Singh. I think we tried our best to go there too. And what there was one party on the right, pretty much everybody else on the left, no differentiation. Liberals decided to stay with their leader and their party. And we had a lot of people that stayed home or defected to the People's Party. And, people say the People's Party is a far right-wing party. They drew 11% support in a place like Windsor. So, I don't agree with everything that they say. I'm still loyal to the CPC party, but at the end of the day, we have to acknowledge that Maxime Bernier cut into our vote quite a bit. And even if people didn't outright go and volunteer and vote for him, then certainly a lot of people stayed home because they just weren't impressed with what they saw.
Don't you think, Daryl, I'm
Yeah,
just going to jump in here, sorry, just quickly, that once the lockdowns and mandates end, that support for Max Bernier and the People's Party is going to like completely dissipate? I don't know where I don't think it's going to go anywhere into one place or another, or anyone's going to benefit from that. But I think as spring comes, mandates and lockdowns lift, that, yeah, there's still going to be anti-government sentiment there, but that Max kind of benefits from, but I don't see them going any other place but Conservatives.
Yeah, no, I think there's two threats to Maxime. Just quickly on that. The first is obviously if the pandemic was to go away, 50% of people right now want to see restrictions lifted, and I think he's obviously speaking to that. And then the other issue is if the new Conservative leader starts cutting his grass a bit, then I think that would be the worst situation for him. But having said that, I don't agree with everything that he says, but ultimately, I do think that the platform for the grassroots was tough to get excited about, and it definitely hurt our volunteer base, our fundraising, and our ability to just be excited about what we were going to vote.
Yeah, this is I'm sorry, I just can't go on without hearing this because I think the narrative is not quite correct, respectfully. The fact of the matter is that post-election research has indicated that the number of people in the 905 and the other areas that you were talking about, Brian, were at least willing to consider voting Conservative. That universe of people was larger under Aaron O'Toole than it was under Andrew Scheer and that it was under Stephen J. Harper in 2015. So, he got more votes. And he got them in the places where he needed to get them. Not quite enough. First campaign in the middle of a pandemic. Let's not forget that. And what's driving the angst in Western conservative circles? People who won had margins of 50,000 votes were getting margins of 30,000 votes. Well, I would like to in rural Alberta their margin to be down to 10,000 votes. And we pick up those seats in Ontario and Quebec that we've got to pick up. Okay, that's correct thinking. Not that, oh my gosh, I only won by 30,000 votes, we got to ditch the leader. And the research has shown we were making inroads in 905 with Aaron O'Toole. So now Aaron O'Toole is no longer the leader. I get that. So we've got to continue to do better and smarter in your community in Mississauga, Brian, and my former community in Brampton and so on. And one of the ways is we got to get better candidates because our candidate selection was a little bit not what it should have been. Be better organized well before the election in these communities and have a message that they want to hear to. Jason Kenney had a great kind of way of looking at it. Actually, Stephen Harper said this to me. We basically consider maybe somebody is listening to your radio station on an old-fashioned radio set where you have to tune in. People in new communities aren't even hearing Conservative Party unless they tune in to our dial position. And we've got to get them to tune in. Once they tune in, they'll be very interested in what we have to say. I have no doubt in saying that. They'll be interested in our fiscal policy. They'll be interested in how we want to grow Canada and so on and so forth. But they're not even on our dial yet. And that's the job of the campaign well before the writ is dropped next time around.
So you got to do something to appeal to new Canadians, to the immigrant community.
Yeah, and it's got to be like, and Harper was brilliant at this. He had things that were so under the radar, but the Chinese Canadian community thought it was really important. Oh my gosh, the Conservatives said something that it was interesting to me as a Chinese Canadian. I'm going to listen more closely to Stephen Harper in the future. Same in a lot of other communities, and that kind of opened the door for us to be considered, and it also provided a shield for us for when the Liberals inevitably said we were a bunch of racist idiots. People would say, well, actually, no, Stephen Harper's actually saying something that I agree with on an issue I care about, so they can't be racist idiots. And that's the kind of strategy you've got to have in the 905 and elsewhere, if you're going to be successful in urban areas in Canada today.
You know, I think that you guys actually won the popular opinion, did you not? You didn't win government, but you actually got,
yes,
you won the popular opinion. You actually got more votes this year than you did under Andrew Scheer, more votes than you did under Stephen Harper. You actually got votes. Now, you may not have spread them out across the country the way that you need to, but you actually got more votes. And I wonder why you bailed out on him so quickly.
Well, we got to get it's done. The deed is done, but I would like to see a change of culture in the Conservative Party where we don't do one and done. You know, Andrew Scheer, one and done. Now Aaron O'Toole, one and done. You got to give the leader a little bit of breathing room here, especially when you're running during a pandemic. It was not an easy job when Mr. Trudeau was spending all that time in front of his cottage, you know, every day. He wanted to talk to Canadians with his hand on his chest and so on. So, you know, you got to give props to Aaron O'Toole. And they were scared. The Liberals were scared. After the first 2 weeks of the campaign, Aaron was on a roll and they had to recalibrate and they did the politics of division. That's what the Liberals did, to divide us between those who were vaccinated and those who weren't vaccinated and demonize the unvaccinated people. And you got to hate those people and they're out protesting me. So you got to vote for me. And he knew that, you know, at that time, you know, 70% of the population was vaccinated. So the odds were in his favor. But, you know, it's terrible that I guess you can win an election that way, although everybody thought he was going to get a massive majority. He didn't get that. Aaron O'Toole prevented that. But at the end of the day, Mr. Trudeau practiced the politics of division. So I think that there's a real opportunity next time. You know, I think Trudeau is nearing his best before date if he hasn't already gone past it. And I think the next leader will have an opportunity to, as Daryl, as you're all saying, present a coherent message. It's got to be internally consistent. And I think one of the things we were missing in the campaign was something big, like a big idea. We had a bunch of little ideas.
Carbon taxes, that was a big idea.
Well, I mean, in Aaron's defense, you know, we Conservatives, or a bunch of us, spent a lot of time saying, you know, Harper in the last campaign and Scheer, we didn't have a position on climate change. That killed us in urban communities. So what does Aaron O'Toole do? He gets a position on climate change and we're going, oh my God, he's got a position on climate change. I hate it. So we got to make up our minds, folks. You know, what lane are we in on this?
I want to take a break for some messages and come back and let's talk about some of the potential leadership candidates after this. Stay with us, everybody. Welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. I want to welcome tonight the Honorable Tony Clement, former provincial and federal MPP, MP, cabinet minister, both federally and provincially, former leadership candidate. Were you a leadership candidate provincially as well as federally or just federally?
Yeah, when Mike Harris retired, I ran for leader, came in third behind Ernie Eves and the late, great Jim Flaherty.
So you've got lots of experience with this kind of a situation.
I've got lots of experience losing leadership. Yes, I do. Thank you.
Sarah McIntyre, who's got great experience in communications, both with the former Prime Minister Stephen Harper, as well as the former Premier of BC, Christy Clark. And actually, I think that Christy, I think at the time was married or just divorced from a Liberal and was thought of as reasonably moderate. And so you've got a little bit of experience of sort of bridging those two divides.
Managing that caucus was a very difficult task.
It was a Liberal Party that was really the Conservative Party of British Columbia. And Daryl Woke.
I mean, they had people like, you know, Terry Lake, and, you know, then you also had people like Christy Clark, and it was a pretty big coalition, but very unique to British Columbia, as all politics of British Columbia. It's unique in and of themselves.
I tell you, I was actually the president of the West Vancouver Liberal Association, and I took on that role before I realized what the Liberal Association was, and it was really quite an interesting experience for me. And Daryl Woke, who is a long-term Tory activist and someone who's actually run for municipal politics and someone who I've got a lot of respect from. And he's interesting because he's a very conservative-minded person, but his roles have been in things like fair share appeal. And so you've been fighting for social services. And so you've got an interesting view of things. Tony, I gotta tell you that half an hour ago, or maybe it was 45 minutes ago, I got a call from someone who was in Parliament with you, and said that I couldn't say his name, but he said he was a Liberal backbench, a Liberal member of Parliament. He said he was a very good friend of yours, someone that you saw quite a bit, and he says you got to tell Tony that if they elect Pierre Poilievre, they're going to be sentenced to the minorities forever. And regressive conservatives, and we don't have to do much, and we'll always get elected again. But if they go with someone like Lisa Raitt, then we'll have to work hard, because she's the type of person that can win in suburban Ontario. What do you think about that?
Sarah, Daryl, don't you love it when Liberals and the CBC and all of the elites tell us how to run the Conservative Party? Isn't that the best feeling?
Yeah.
So
we went to TV yesterday as they were doing their
You just need another Liberal Party, really.
Yeah.
That's it.
yeah, exactly. If we only had another Liberal Party, everything would be fine.
Yeah.
But they want
one candidate that Rosie would take a selfie with. That would be great.
They want not only another Liberal Party, but a not as successful another Liberal Party, so that we would just be a Liberal Party of losers. So no, I look. I would just go back to our initial reaction to Justin Trudeau becoming the Liberal leader, and we thought it was like Christmas in July. Oh, we're gonna wipe the floor with this guy. This guy is an empty suit. He's all hat and no cattle. And oh my gosh, he wants to legalize pot. What sort of a crazy guy is this? So we're just gonna make mincemeat out of the guy. And we all know what happened. They went from third place to first place in one election cycle. So be careful what you wish for. I have talked to other Liberals in the last 24 hours who said, we're going from the devil we know to a devil we don't know. So, be careful what you wish for, folks, in the Liberal Party with Aaron O'Toole gone and maybe a more red meat conservative in there. You don't know necessarily how to run against them, but you knew how to run against Aaron O'Toole. So there you go.
Daryl, you've been talking about Maxime Bernier and his appeal. He lost in the leadership and left and didn't stay loyal to the Conservative Party and created his own party. Some people have suggested that he or Pierre Poilievre or someone like that would be like Republican Trump come to Canada, and that the Conservative Party has a choice whether they want populism and Trump imported from the United States to take over the Conservative Party, or to remain the Republican Party that it would have if they had gotten rid of Trump. Are you faced with that kind of a choice today? The Conservative Party is going to become like the Trump Party, or are you going to stay the Conservative Party like the Republican Party would have been?
Well, here's the problem with that narrative. In 2015, Trudeau was supposed to be our Barack Obama. Today, he's our Donald Trump. The guy is so divisive. I mean, he's hypocritical. There was obviously protests against him all weekend. That was the main driver. He added more fuel to the divisive fire. I don't think there's any serious conservative that at this point in time, after seeing Justin Trudeau's Canada since 2015, that's saying, you know what, I think the Conservative Party is way too extreme. I'm thinking about moving over to Justin. I think if anything, there's starting to be some competent Liberals that are starting to say, you know what, maybe we need to get rid of this divisive guy and put Chrystia Freeland in. And I think that would actually be the biggest threat right now to the Conservative Party, is if Justin Trudeau stepped down. But having said that, I think there's a well-skilled caucus right now. There's a lot of names that are thrown around. I joked the last time I was on the show with Sarah that I thought Rona Ambrose would be the leader at the end of the year. She said that she would never jump back into it. Sarah was right about that. But I actually like Pierre quite a bit, and I think he's great in the House. I think he's a great communicator, fluently bilingual, new generation. Ultimately, I thought he handled the truck protest terrifically. He's inclusive. I also love Leslyn Lewis. I think she's a rising star in the party, and I actually voted for her in the last leadership race. You mentioned Lisa Raitt. I don't want to make it sound like she's a Liberal, but my feeling is this is not going to be the election where we're looking for moderate or liberal light. There is going to be a true blue conservative. And I think the difference between this time and last time is there'll be no tolerance to run as a true blue and then switch the party and flip-flop once the leadership's over.
So, Sarah, no one like Peter MacKay could win right now, that they're all going to have to be right-wing like Darrell Wolk?
Well, Peter MacKay didn't win last time. So.
I'm libertarian, by the way.
Look, I think there's two things, three things I would say. People vote governments out. And I think the reason why Aaron had such a short runway from his caucus is because they really felt that this last election was Justin's time's up. And the fact that Aaron didn't deliver, every move he made was seen by a very impatient caucus that was hearing from the grassroots daily about the anger towards the Trudeau government, the anger about lockdowns, and Aaron wasn't seen to be capitalizing on that, using it strategically to grow the base. And so I think you got to remember that oftentimes the general electorate get sick of parties after a third term. I do think that the electorate composition has changed as a result of the pandemic. Now, whether or not that's permanent, I don't know. I live in the little town of Elora. I live in Michael Chong country. And it's a very artistic community, but there was a lot of trucker convoy supporters here. There was a lot of PPC supporters here. And yeah, it's rural, but it's known to be a rural liberal type of community where, there seem to be, we're all people from the city that have come out here to live the better life. And I do think that there has the response by all governments, provincial and federal, that there is an anti-government sentiment about getting government out of our lives. And that's a real opportunity for the next Liberal leader if they can do that, and also kind of keep their caucus together. And I also think, don't underestimate Pierre Poliver. I mean, I've known him since 2002, and he's very hardworking. He never takes no for an answer. He's always been a team player. He delivers messages consistently, to the chagrin of the parliamentary press gallery, but was always great to have as a backbencher to push out messages when I was in the Prime Minister's office. He could deliver it succinctly. He has a good command of policy issues, and he actually really understands what's important to the grassroots, and he can speak that very eloquently. So I think, and to boot, he's completely bilingual. So don't underestimate Pierre. But I think we've got a lot of other people that
Like who?
Well, I think, it's probably early for someone like Melissa Lanceman, but I think she's going to have a strong voice in who becomes leader. She's young. She's got lots of experience in politics. There's Michelle Rempel.
Hold on a second. When Daryl Wolf was talking about his support for Dr. Leslie Ann Lewis and the social conservatives and the churches that she was able to coordinate, do you think a lesbian could be elected leader of the Conservative Party?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Really? Okay, good.
Yeah, a quick point on Pierre as well is that his message on inflation and monetary policy and the housing market has been outstanding. And I think that's the one issue that we've gained traction on, putting the pandemic aside. There is a cost of living crisis in this country, and Pierre's been on message. He's tied to that brand, being associated with that message. And I think that's where the Liberal weakness is right now. There's going to be a point when the pandemic's over, businesses want to open again. People are dealing with high oil prices, high home heating prices, food going through the roof when you can find it on the shelves. And I think people are tired of the housing market not being able to afford to get in. And Trudeau's made it clear he doesn't understand or care about monetary policy. And I think Pierre's messaging around the Bank of Canada and inflation has really resonated with a lot of people, including myself.
Well, I got to tell you, I disagree with a lot of what you've said tonight, Daryl, but the one thing I do agree with is this fiscal policy. And as you may know, I'm a fiscal conservative. In the 2019 leadership debate, Maxime Bernier was the only person who talked about fiscal issues. Even Andrew Scheer didn't talk about fiscal issues during that debate. And in the last election, he wasn't in the leader debate, regrettably, but he was the one person talking about fiscal issues. And Aaron O'Toole was talking about balancing the budget, a decade later, not in the short term. So I agree with you. I think that fiscal issues, particularly coming out of the pandemic, given that we've doubled the size of our national debt, could end up being the winning issue for a Conservative Party. But let's come back to Sarah. What other names have you got?
Oh gosh, I don't know if that's up to me to determine. I know my hometown, Marilyn Gladu, said that she's thinking about it. A lot of these members that are going to be running this time around have had at least time in the House of Commons. They're getting, they're finding their feet. They're dealing with constituents, and so I think there's. it's always, what's the caliber of candidates that you're going to get? I mean, I thought after Andrew Scheer that we would have a lot of really high profile conservatives running. I didn't think we had the caliber of choice that I thought you would have got. It was basically auditioning to be a leader of a G7 country. And that was, I think the choices on the ballot were disappointing. So, hopefully Leoc organizes and sets the rules so that it's not too hard to get into, but it's only serious candidates and we're not in this for too long. I don't think that we need to be, as some have been suggesting, going through, the Goldwater moment, soul searching and, having an identity crisis. I think we need someone that's, experienced, hard grit, knows how to speak to the grassroots, but also has appeal to the general public.
Tony, could anyone from provincial politics make a go of it? Some people have been talking about Premier Doug Ford.
No, he's not running. He's not running. Ronna Ambrose not running. Peter MacKay not running. So here's what's going to happen. You've heard it here first on Brian's show. Here's what's going to happen. The media are going to build up a bunch of names, like 2 dozen names. And one by one, they're going to say, I've never had any interest in running. And the media are going to say, oh my gosh, nobody wants to be leader of the Conservative Party of Canada. What a loser party. Where have I heard that before? Every single leadership race in the last 25 years for the Conservative Party of Canada or its predecessors. So we're gonna have Pierre Poilievre, we're gonna have Leslyn Lewis, and we're gonna have 1 or 2 other candidates who want to make a name for themselves, and that's gonna be it.
You think Michael Chong will throw his hat in the ring?
I don't know. I mean, yeah, possibly he could, but again, they just kicked out the other guy for having a carbon tax message. I'm not sure he wants to be the banner carrier for the carbon tax this time around, as he was way back when after Harper. So again, it's not easy. And Pierre Poilievre, I think he'll eventually come in the race, but he's going to make a considered decision because he knows he's going to have a big bullseye on his back because the mainstream legacy media hate him for being the communicator that he is. So he's gonna, he's got a young family. Does he want to put them through all of this? I think ultimately he will decide that this is his moment, but he's going to consider it for some time.
I keep hearing Patrick Brown's name.
No chance.
Not running.
Yeah, I do think that there is some risk. Like I know Tony was in the race with Kevin O'Leary and Maxine when there was 13 candidates. I don't think you're going to see that. And Tony can probably speak to how hard it is to fundraise and the cost of being a leader.
It's brutal.
Yeah, and I think ultimately, at the end of the day, the biggest risk I think right now, and it may not even be that big of a risk, it could show unity, is that Pierre's probably got a pretty big lead right now, and I think it's going to be pretty difficult for certainly anybody from the outside. I mean, I've heard Caroline Mulroney's name mentioned.
Not running.
Caroline, but yeah, and we keep hearing a lot of not running.
Mark will run. Mark could run. I know he's not experienced, but I love watching. He's more great than Caroline.
The party is a very different beast from when his dad was around, and that's the thing that Peter MacKay had to learn the hard way. That's why, Jean Charest's name is kicking around again in Quebec right now. He's not going to run because it's not the same party anymore.
Yeah, and don't worry, my friends. Maxime has ruled himself out. He's not returning to the corrupt party, he says. So I don't think he's going to jump in the race.
Well, it sounds like Pierre Poilievre is going to be the next leader of the Conservative Party based on this panel of 3. We're going to take a break for some messages and come back with some concluding comments. And maybe I'm going to ask, since Daryl started the conversation today about this past weekend in Ottawa, maybe I'm going to ask you about how politicians, both Liberal as well as Conservative, should be playing the truck convoy in Ottawa. Stay with us, everybody. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. I've had a great time tonight talking to the Honourable Tony Clement, Daryl Wolk, and Sarah McIntyre, 3 Conservative friends. I hope I can still call you friends after today's conversation. Daryl, you started off by saying that you thought that Aaron O'Toole had the wrong strategy in regards to the truck convoy and Pierre Poilievre had the right strategy. So I wonder, given where we are today, what do you each think, both Trudeau and the Conservative potential leadership candidates should be doing in regards to the truck convoy? And maybe I could start with you, Sarah.
Oh, sure. Thanks, Brian. There's not a winning answer to this. Like, let's just accept that there's no right winning answer. But what you have is a massive amount of people that feel not represented. Their voices aren't being heard. It cuts across regions, it cuts across age groups, it cuts across cultures. And, you know, the numbers that they've been able to fundraise, the numbers of people that they've been able to get along the highways as they're rolling there. This is a disaffected group of citizens that needs to have their voice heard, that doesn't feel that their voice is being heard, that is being gaslit by the Prime Minister and being, you know, chided and sidelined by the media as extremists. And I think that that only serves to inflame the sense of dissatisfaction and dissociation that some of these people feel, that just because they're out there protesting government policy, that they're somehow extreme. But these are people that have lost their livelihoods. These are people that are, you know, that have been under this for 2 years. And, you know, we're seeing all across the world these restrictions and mandates being rolled back, and then they're being called extremists and wanting the army to come in. I think the best way to handle it was to say, we understand, we hear you, we know you're frustrated, and we're going to try and figure out ways that we could start rolling these measures back as soon as possible in conjunction with health officials, and what's the best for the public at large.
Daryl, aren't they extremists when they're marching with Confederate flags and Nazi symbols and being funded by Americans, et cetera, et cetera?
I think that the Confederate flag was a plant, to be honest with you. Brilliant strategy to discredit an entire group of people. What I saw was Indigenous drumming ceremonies. I saw a lot of diverse Canadians all standing up against vaccine mandates, passports, getting just tired of the pandemic, tired of all the restrictions, tired of tyranny. And at the end of the day, let's be honest, they were protesting Trudeau, they were protesting the media coverage. And what I would be doing is I'd be reaching out to these Canadians, middle-class Canadians who had their livelihoods and businesses impacted by 2 years of being locked down. And not only would I embrace them with open arms, I'd be cutting a deal with Maxime Bernier if I had won the leadership race.
Tony, if you were a cabinet minister today, what would you do?
I'd say, I hear you. I know you're upset. I know you're frustrated. And I'd also do a shout out to the people who weren't in Ottawa, the ones who were, as Sarah said, lining the highways. I had people in my community driving from Bracebridge to North Bay to see the convoy off on its way to Ottawa. Those were soccer moms and soccer dads. Okay, they're normies. They're the normal people of every community, and whoever latches on to them and becomes their champion, man, oh man. You cannot stop that person, Pierre Poilievre.
It was clear from the beginning that the media really wanted a certain narrative, and it just didn't play out in reality. And that's where I say that last week was a really embarrassing time for the mainstream media, because they just covered it in a biased and dishonest fashion.
Well, I do think that you know, the vast majority of truckers, supposedly 85 to 90%, have been vaccinated. I think the vast majority of Canadians call it, you know, 78 to 84% have got one or two vaccines. That said, number one, people are tired of lockdown measures. And number two, even if there's only 15% of people that aren't vaccinated, that's what, 4 to 5 million Canadians. And you can't cut out of society 4 to 5 million people. And so they do deserve to be heard. I don't think they deserve to take over and occupy downtown Ottawa, but they do deserve to be heard. And so therefore, I do think that one of the things that leadership is all about is bringing people together. And so I do agree with you that I think that some people have been too divisive. I wouldn't be out there marching with them, but I would be listening to their concerns. Anyway, Sarah McIntyre, Daryl Wolk, Honorable Tony Clement, thank you so much for sharing the last hour with us. I really appreciate your points of view. We'll see if Pierre Poilievre actually ends up becoming the leader of the Conservative Party, as it sounds like all of you are thinking. I only wish that maybe, Sarah, you put your name for it, because I think you'd be a fantastic leader, and we need a female.
I agree.
Female to be running and take
Absolutely.
the Conservative Party.
Right now. No, thank you.
Thanks for joining us. That's our show for tonight. I remind you, I'm on every Monday through Friday at 6 o'clock on 960 AM. You can stream me online anywhere from Canada, even in a truck convoy at www.saga960am.ca. You can get all my podcasts and videocasts on briancrombie.com, on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and on Apple, Audible, and Speakeasy podcasts. Thanks for joining us, Sarah, Daryl, Tony. All the best. Good night, everybody.
Thanks.